The narcissistic abuse cycle is a sophisticated and devastating form of psychological manipulation that functions like a closed loop. Unlike healthy relationships where conflict leads to resolution and growth, the narcissistic cycle is designed to erode the victim's sense of self-worth and reality, keeping them perpetually tethered to the abuser. Understanding this phenomenon requires looking at both the mechanics of the cycle and the profound psychological fallout it leaves behind. The 4 stages of the cycle. The cycle typically begins with idealization, often referred to as love bombing. In this stage, the narcissist showers the victim with excessive affection, praise, and attention. They mirror the victim's interests and values, creating a soulmate illusion. This isn't just romance. It is a tactical grooming phase designed to lower the victim's defenses and build a reservoir of positive memories that the abuser will later weaponize. As the victim becomes emotionally invested, the narcissist shifts into the devaluation phase. This transition is often subtle at first: a backhanded compliment, a sarcastic remark, or a cold shoulder. Over time, it escalates into overt criticism, gaslighting, and humiliation. The victim, desperate to return to the bliss of the idealization phase, begins to walk on eggshells, hyperanalyzing their own behavior to avoid triggering the abuser's wrath. The cycle eventually reaches a breaking point in the discard phase. Once the narcissist has depleted the victim's emotional resources or found a new source of supply, they may abruptly end the relationship or withdraw entirely, often with a shocking lack of empathy. This is frequently followed by hoovering, named after the vacuum cleaner. If the narcissist needs something, validation, control, or a temporary ego boost, they will attempt to suck the victim back into the cycle by feigning remorse or reapplying the love-bombing tactics from the start. The psychological impact on the victim. The effects of this cycle are not merely emotional. They are neurobiological and identity-shattering. One of the most insidious outcomes is trauma bonding. Because the narcissist intersperses cruelty with intermittent reinforcement, moments of kindness or the old them, the victim's brain becomes addicted to the highs of reconciliation. This creates a chemical dependency similar to gambling, making it excruciatingly difficult for the victim to leave, even when they recognize the harm being done. Cognitive dissonance is another hallmark of narcissistic abuse. The victim is forced to hold 2 contradictory beliefs simultaneously: that the abuser is the loving person from the idealization phase, and that the abuser is the person currently causing them pain. To survive this mental tension, victims often rationalize the abuse, blaming themselves for the narcissist's outbursts. This leads to a total erosion of the inner compass, leaving the victim unable to trust their own perceptions or memory, a state exacerbated by chronic gaslighting. Furthermore, victims often suffer from complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD. Unlike traditional PTSD, which stems from a single event, CPTSD results from prolonged, repetitive trauma. Symptoms include hypervigilance, a constant state of high alert, anticipating the next blow-up. Loss of self. The victim may feel like a hollow shell of their former self, having sacrificed their hobbies, friendships, and opinions to appease the abuser. Social isolation. Narcissists often use smear campaigns to turn mutual friends or family against the victim, leaving them without a support system just when they need it most. The path to recovery. Recovery from narcissistic abuse is not a linear process of getting over a breakup. It is a process of deprogramming. It requires the victim to move through the fog, fear, obligation, and guilt, and rebuild their nervous system from a state of chronic fight or flight. Healing involves establishing no contact to break the chemical addiction of the trauma bond, and engaging in therapy that focuses specifically on narcissistic abuse and boundary setting. The ultimate goal of recovery is the reclamation of the self. While the cycle is designed to leave the victim powerless, the act of recognizing the pattern is the first step toward breaking it permanently. To delve deeper, we must look at the hidden architecture of this abuse, the specific psychological mechanisms that keep the victim trapped, and the long-term physiological changes that occur within the body. Narcissistic abuse is often described as soul murder because it doesn't just attack the victim's happiness, it attacks their very ability to perceive reality. The invisible shackles, gaslighting and cognitive dissonance. The primary weapon in the narcissist's arsenal is gaslighting, a form of psychological manipulation where the abuser feeds the victim false information to make them question their own memory, perception, and sanity. In the context of the cycle, gaslighting serves as the glue that keeps the devaluation phase going. When a victim confronts the abuser about a lie or a hurtful act, the narcissist might respond with, "That never happened, you're too sensitive," or "You're imagining things." Over months or years, this creates a profound state of cognitive dissonance. The victim's mind becomes a domestic battlefield. On one side is the evidence of their own eyes, the abuse. On the other is the narrative provided by the person they love, the gaslighting. Because the human brain craves consistency, and because the victim is often trauma-bonded, they typically resolve this tension by splitting. They bury the memory of the abuse to preserve the image of the loving partner, leading to a fragmented sense of self. The biological toll. The body keeps the score. Narcissistic abuse is a physical experience as much as an emotional one. When a victim lives in the devaluation phase, they are in a state of chronic stress. This triggers the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, to constantly flood the body with cortisol and adrenaline. Long-term exposure to these stress hormones can lead to brain remodeling. Chronic stress can actually shrink the hippocampus, responsible for memory and emotional regulation, and overstimulate the amygdala, the brain's fear center. This explains why victims often struggle with brain fog and sudden, intense panic attacks. Autoimmune issues. The constant state of fight or flight suppresses the immune system, leading to unexplained physical ailments, chronic fatigue, and digestive issues. Sleep disturbances. Hypervigilance doesn't turn off at night. Victims often suffer from insomnia or night terrors, as the subconscious mind continues to process the threat. The social architecture. Isolation and the smear campaign. A narcissist rarely acts in a vacuum. To maintain control, they often employ triangulation. This involves bringing a third person into the dynamic, a friend, a family member, or even a new romantic interest, to create a sense of competition or to make the victim feel jealous and insecure. By making the victim feel replaceable, the narcissist ensures the victim will work harder to please them. As the relationship nears the discard phase, the narcissist often initiates a smear campaign. They preemptively tell lies or half-truths to the victim's social circle, painting themselves as the victim and the actual victim as unstable or abusive. This serves two purposes. It ruins the victim's reputation so they have no one to turn to for help. It provides the narcissist with a backup, support system, often called flying monkeys, who will defend the narcissist's behavior and pressure the victim to reconcile. The concept of supply. To understand why the narcissist does this, one must understand narcissistic supply. The narcissist views other people not as individuals with feelings, but as appliances that provide a specific service. Admiration, money, sex, or a target for their repressed shame. When a victim is idealized, they are providing positive supply. When the narcissist begins the devaluation, they are often seeking negative supply, the victim's tears, anger, and frantic explanations. To a narcissist, a victim's emotional reaction is proof of the narcissist's power. This is why gray rocking, becoming as uninteresting and unreactive as a gray rock, is often the most effective way to end the cycle. When the supply runs dry, the narcissist usually moves on. Breaking the mirror. The final stage of the impact is the loss of agency. The victim becomes so attuned to the narcissist's needs that they lose the ability to make simple decisions for themselves. They may look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back. The vibrant, confident individual they once were has been replaced by a shadow defined entirely by the abuser's whims. Healing from this requires a scorched earth policy toward the abuser's narrative. It involves moving from the question, "Why did they do this to me?" to the realization they are incapable of doing anything else. The gray rock method and the phenomenon of flying monkeys are two of the most critical concepts for a victim to understand when attempting to break the cycle. They represent the defensive and offensive maneuvers in the final stages of a narcissistic relationship. The gray rock method. Becoming unappetizing supply. The gray rock method is a behavioral strategy used when no contact is not immediately possible, such as in co-parenting or workplace situations. The goal is to make yourself so boring, so unreactive, and so colorless that the narcissist loses interest and seeks their supply elsewhere. To a narcissist, emotional reactions, whether they are tears of hurt or shouts of anger, are a form of energy. By practicing gray rock, you deny them this energy. You provide short, non-committal answers like, okay, I see, or, that's an interesting perspective. You do not share personal news, you do not defend yourself against false accusations, and you do not ask them questions about their life. You essentially become a gray rock on the side of the road. Present but utterly unremarkable. The risk of this method is the extinction burst. When a narcissist realizes they are losing control, they often escalate their behavior significantly to provoke a reaction. This is the most dangerous time for a victim, as the abuser may resort to extreme tactics to crack the rock. Staying consistent during this burst is the only way to prove that the supply has truly dried up. Flying monkeys, the narcissist's proxy army. The term flying monkeys is derived from the Wizard of Oz, referring to the Wicked Witch's henchmen who did her bidding. In the context of narcissistic abuse, these are third parties, often friends, siblings, or even the victim's own parents, whom the narcissist recruits to harass, spy on, or guilt-trip the victim. There are two types of flying monkeys. The accidental monkey. These are well-meaning people who have been brainwashed by the narcissist's smear campaign. They believe the narcissist is the victim and may approach you saying things like, "They really love you, why can't you just forgive them?" The malignant monkey. These individuals enjoy the drama and the reflected power of the narcissist. They actively participate in the bullying and help the narcissist maintain a sense of superiority. The presence of flying monkeys creates a siege mentality for the victim. It feels as though the entire world is siding with the abuser, which reinforces the victim's isolation and self-doubt. Breaking free often requires pruning these people from your life as well, or at the very least setting impenetrable boundaries with them. The concept of hoovering, the false promise of change. When the narcissist senses they have lost control or when their new source of supply fails, they initiate hoovering. This is perhaps the most difficult stage for a victim because it mimics the idealization phase. The narcissist may send a check-in text, apologize profusely, often for the first time, or claim they have had a breakthrough in therapy. It is crucial to understand that hoovering is not an act of love. It is an act of ownership. The narcissist is checking to see if the tether is still attached. If the victim relents, the cycle does not start over at a healthy baseline. It accelerates. The devaluation phase will typically return faster, and with more intensity than before, as the narcissist now feels a need to punish the victim for attempting to leave. The long-term recovery, integration. The final stage of healing is integration. This is when the victim stops trying to fix the narcissist or understand why they are the way they are, and instead turns that curiosity inward. It involves grieving the illusion, accepting that the person they loved in the idealization phase never actually existed, it was a mask. Boundaries as self-care. Learning that no is a complete sentence and that protecting one's peace is not selfish. Reparenting the self. Healing the original wounds, often from childhood, that made them susceptible to a narcissistic predator in the first place. As the victim moves further away from the cycle, the brain fog clears. They begin to trust their gut feelings again, the very feelings the narcissist worked so hard to silence. To ensure the cycle of narcissistic abuse does not repeat, one must develop a refined radar for early behaviors that signal a lack of empathy or a need for pathological control. In the beginning, these red flags often look like intense passion or high-level compatibility, but they are actually the scaffolding of a future prison. The fast-forward strategy. The most common red flag is hyperacceleration. A healthy relationship develops through stages of mutual self-disclosure and earned trust. A narcissist, however, will attempt to bypass these stages. They may declare their love within days, talk about marriage or moving in together within weeks, or insist that they have never felt this way about anyone before. This is often framed as a soulmate connection, but it is actually a tactic to establish dependency before you have a chance to see their flaws. If a relationship feels like a whirlwind that you can't slow down, it is usually a sign that your boundaries are being bypassed. The boundary test. Early in a relationship, a narcissist will perform small boundary probes. They might teasingly push a limit you've set, perhaps showing up unannounced after you said you were busy, or pressured you into changing your plans. The red flag isn't just the push, it's their reaction when you say no. A healthy individual will apologize and adjust. A narcissist will react with narcissistic injury. They act deeply hurt or offended that you would suggest they did something wrong. Guilt tripping. I just wanted to see you because I missed you so much, I didn't realize that was a crime. Mockery. They might call you controlling or too sensitive for having the boundary in the first place. The victim narrative and the X factor. Listen closely to how a potential partner speaks about their past. If every former partner was crazy, abusive, or obsessed with them, and the person claims they were an innocent bystander in every conflict, this is a massive red flag. While people do experience toxic relationships, a narcissist's history is a consistent trail of wreckage where they are always the hero or the martyr. They lack the reflective functioning, the ability to look back and say, I played a part in that and I've learned from it. If they have no long-term friendships or have burned every professional bridge, the common denominator is likely their own behavior. Subtle devaluation, the pebbling of contempt. Before the overt abuse begins, there is often a phase of micro-devaluation. This includes the joking insult. They say something cruel, then tell you to get a sense of humor when you react. Intermittent silence. They disappear for hours or a day after a minor disagreement, training you to fear their withdrawal. The pedestal flip. They praise you in one breath and then compare you unfavorably to someone else in the next, keeping you off balance and eager to win back their approval. Grandiosity and lack of empathy. Watch how they treat people who can do nothing for them. Waitstaff, janitors, or strangers in traffic. A narcissist often harbors a sense of entitlement, believing the rules don't apply to them. Furthermore, observe their reaction to your successes or your pain. If you share good news and they immediately steer the conversation back to themselves, or if you share a struggle and they seem bored or annoyed by your emotional needs, they are showing you their lack of empathy. In their world, you are a supporting character in their movie, and you are expected to stick to the script. The check-in with your own body. The most reliable red flag isn't external, it's internal. Many survivors of narcissistic abuse report that in the early stages of the relationship, they felt a sense of anxiety disguised as chemistry. If you feel butterflies that feel more like a nervous stomach, if you find yourself rehearsing what you're going to say to them to avoid an argument, or if you feel exhausted after spending time with them despite the high of their attention, your nervous system is flagging a threat. Subscribe, learn, and share.